Hi, welcome back to Take Your Medicine. My name is Sadie.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we're here to talk about how racist America is.
Yes. Racism. We also have monkeypox.
And because we're also a sick country.
Yes. And we also have a story about the Amish. So
it's riveting.
You're going to have to stick around to the end for that one, though. Okay, so what do we have up first? This one.
So we have this video compilation of phone calls that CNN has received from distraught Black people following the Buffalo mass shooting, which was a tragedy. It was not necessarily racially motivated. This was just an unhinged young man. And he picked his target, which was a primarily Black location, and he did what he did, and it was horrible, regardless of the color of skin of these people. But this is CNN's
politicization.
Thank you. Politicization. I still can't say it. Of this event by using these phone calls that people have left with CNN. So.
All right, let's get into it.
Thank you for calling CNN.
There are definite feelings about this craziness that's going on in America for the last 400 years. This is just what's current. This is what's in the current news cycle. We've been targeted since we've been here. 400 years of being terrorized by white supremacists.
I am a 62-year-old African-American woman, wife, mother, grandmother. I lived through the 60s and the 70s being called a I thought by the time my grandkids were born, this would be over. They wouldn't have to be afraid.
I just want to say right there real quick, like, censoring the N-word when it's coming from a Black woman who's recounting her experience.
Well, it's a violation of the FCC, I believe.
No, not online. FCC has no jurisdiction online. Yeah.
Well, this might have also played on CNN's
That's
networks.
true. But,
so they could have just edited it for the television format and then just not had
But also,
an
if you're doing reporting about real-life events, it shouldn't be controlled at all. Either from
True.
any... So I'm just saying, like...
But...
in a way that's like infantilized, like everyone's talking about how we want to hear Black voices and everything, and then they're recounting their experience and we beep out the word. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, just say the word. Like, she's the one saying it. She's the one recounting her experience. And we're just going to like, oh, white people aren't allowed to hear that.
Right.
It's like, come on. Just like, it's history.
Yeah.
She's recounting some anyway.
Right.
It's just a pet peeve. Like, just don't. It's fine. Stop being so sensitive.
Well, it's CNN. They have to.
Yeah.
Now I'm afraid again, and I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm hurt. And I'm scared.
This shooting at the supermarket does not change how we feel. We've been feeling unsafe for decades, and nothing has been done. So it's just kind of crazy that people want to know how we feel now. We feel the same now as we felt yesterday, and the day before that, and the year before that, and the year before that.
So I'm sitting here asking myself, what kind of world did I just bring my brown babies into? We can't do anything. We can't go to the grocery store. We can't go to church. We can't go to the mall. We can't go to the movies. And all those people are gone because this kid was indoctrinated with so much hate.
This hate and this white supremacy makes me feel unwanted in my own country and unsafe in my own country. I know that racism is everywhere, but I don't feel like racism should cost me my life.
We have to try to make changes from the top down, and I just don't see it changing anytime soon for the better, because we don't have the good proper leadership here in the United States, and so because of that, looks like I'm going to have to leave.
Is there a particular one you wanted to get to? Because I want to talk about this already.
I just wanted to kind of play it through. I had a greater point.
I'm exhausted. It's suffocating. And I'm completely fed up. There has to be change, and we need it soon. It's a pretty terrifying feeling to know that the people that are smiling at you, walking past you in the park one day, could be the very ones that walk into the store and kill you or your loved ones. that very evening. It's a very frightening place to be, America, for African Americans.
Someone decides to drive 2.5 hours to go and take out their anger and their upset on people simply because they're brown. Like, let that sink in. Let that sink in.
I noticed how not a hair shuffled, not a shirt ruffled, no problem when they put the handcuffs on him. He wasn't even put to the ground. He just killed 10 people. There is a war on black people in this country, and it's been going on for 400 years. And I just don't know how long that black people are going to keep on taking this shit.
Wow.
So as far as that last one, the reason that a violent arrest didn't occur was because the shooter was cooperative.
Right.
He basically turned himself in because he did what he wanted to do.
Right.
And the difference between that and some of these more violent arrests that we see with the televised black people that have committed a crime and then get wrestled to the ground is that they are resisting arrest.
Right.
So that's the difference. I just wanted to make that clear.
But also, I don't know if New York probably doesn't have the death penalty. But if this was any other state, yeah, okay, he got arrested somewhat peacefully, but guess what? 10 years later, he's probably going to be executed.
Right.
So it's like,
right.
You know, I don't understand. Like, they simultaneously don't want the police being trigger happy, and yet when somebody gets arrested peacefully, they're like, how dare this happen? You know, it's like,
right. Well, and my greater point of showing this, you can tell that these people are genuinely hurt and terrified, and that's the part that's sad.
Yeah.
They've been fed this narrative that white people are out to get them and want them dead, and we will kill them ourselves. And they buy it.
Right.
And they live in it. And so I believe their fears are genuine, but I think they're misguided.
Right.
I think it's sad that these large media conglomerates are so willing to feed people this narrative and actually terrify them. And obviously CNN compiled this to be like, see, look how bad white people are. These black people have been, oppressed and suppressed for so many years. And it's like, that's not the sad part. The sad part is not that white people are evil. The sad part is that we have told black people that we don't value them.
Yeah.
Even though that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
They've been lied to that they have no value so that they feel this fear. And that one guy said he needs to leave. That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want these people to feel like they have to leave our country. It's our country.
Right.
They're Americans too. I don't want them to look at me and think that I'm going to kill them tomorrow. That's awful. That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want to feel like when I walk next to a black person, they're thinking, you're an evil white person and I hate you.
Right.
What kind of country is that to live in?
Mm-hmm.
This is sad, but not for the reasons they're trying to make you feel sad.
Yeah, and also, like, this particular shooter may have expressed your racist sentiments, right? But we have mass shootings with some regularity in this country because it's 330 million people.
Right.
No one, I guess what I'm saying is, like, no one's safe from the risk of being a victim of a mass shooting. Like,
right.
This guy may have expressed racist sentiments, but that doesn't make black people uniquely victims. I mean,
right.
You look at Sandy Hook, the shooter killed like 20 white children.
Right.
No one's saying, he had racist. I mean, this is just a mass shooter that took the lives of innocent people, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter what the motivations are. Once you're at the point that you're going to become a mass shooter, it's like no one's safe. He could target whoever he wants,
Right.
And that one lady said, well, we can't go to malls. We can't go to churches. It's like, by that logic, white kids can't go to school.
Yeah.
Because they're at risk of being in a school shooting. Which
primarily white children are the victims of school shootings.
Right. And there's racially motivated or ethnically motivated attacks against Jewish synagogues all the time.
All the time.
And you don't hear Jews coming out and saying, we can't even go to synagogue.
Right.
So it's like, I think I agree with you that their pain is real, but they're being fed this narrative that they are uniquely victims because of their race. Mm-hmm. And that may be true in some situations, but there's just, I think the reality is there's just evil in this world. And painting an entire race of people, white people, as somehow being uniquely oppressive of black people, is another type of evil that's arising from the aftermath of these individual evil events. And so it's like, who are you helping by saying that we don't feel safe? Like, first of all, you're playing right into the hands of the white supremacists. They want you to leave the country.
Exactly.
They want their white ethno state, number one. And number two, that's just not how any historical movement has succeeded, by people saying, oh, we're so scared and terrified. No, stand up. You know, you can be outspoken. You could even be an advocate against gun rights if you want to.
Right.
But don't sit here and say that you're a victim, right? Because of your race. Don't use this collectivist mindset. I'm scared to go to my church because something halfway across the country happened, 5 years ago.
Right.
It's like,
but also that doesn't make a lot of sense either, because churches tend to be self-segregating anyway. Like, there are black churches and there are white churches. There just tend to be differences in philosophy of preaching and pastoral leadership that comes with the different races. So this lady saying that she can't go to church, I'm thinking, you're probably going to an all-black church anyway, unless she means that she's scared to go to church because someone who is not a member of the church is going to come in and commit one of these atrocities, which could happen. There was a threat of a school shooting when I was in high school, and there was a threat of a school shooting when I was in college. I could have easily been in both of those situations at both times, because I went to a very large high school and I went to a relatively large college. That's just the risk that you run when you put yourself into a public place. Yeah. You can't let fear control your life. And I think we've talked about this before. People that live in such fear all the time, I think, don't truly have anything to look forward to spiritually or metaphysically.
Right. Well, I think most Christians that are sufficiently devout would be like, I'm going to church regardless of what's happening now.
Right.
Like government shutting down churches for COVID, we're going to ignore that and we're going to eat whatever fines they give us, right? If there's a threat of violence, religious people, they worship anyway. I mean, there's the Christian sort of history is just littered with examples of martyrs, people who died because they wouldn't sacrifice their faith because of what was happening in the outside world. Some people knew that they were going to die by practicing Christianity and they did it anyway. In this situation, it's an exceedingly rare event. So it's like the vast majority of black parishioners are never going to even encounter any like gun violence within a church.
Right.
So it's like,
yeah, Christian churches are not usually the target of these terrible vitriolic attacks. But to your point, I think there's a lot of Christians who, if they are actually Christian, if there was a significant and reliable threat of violence against their church, they probably would all show up in spite of that threat to pray for their safety and that this person has a change of heart or that the threat is diminished in some way. And same with Jews in their synagogues. I mean, how many synagogues did this during COVID? They said, we're still going to worship. We don't care if you come and arrest us. We don't care if you try to shut down our synagogue. They did it because of the threat of being shut down, because that's how important their relationship to each other and their church and their God is. So I think this lady is saying that she can't go to church, but I can't help but think that maybe she isn't as spiritually inclined as she claims. Right. Because this probably wouldn't even be something that would bother her then.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing I would say too is that there's I think I've said this before, but there's an opening for conservatives here in terms of gun rights. Black people say that in these calls, at least, and again, I don't want to use these calls to represent all black people, because these are people that obviously watch CNN and call into CNN. Right. So it's a heavily biased sample of the types of thinking that these people are doing.
Well, and it's a self-selection too.
Exactly.
They have chosen to call CNN.
But they say that they feel unsafe everywhere they go. And so I think there's a conservative opportunity here to say, hey, black people, we're going to run free organizations, come and attend. We're going to teach you gun safety. We're going to teach you how to operate a gun. We're going to show you where you can purchase your first gun. Hell, we might even have guns available for you to purchase if you're interested. Like, where's the grassroots movement to go to these people that genuinely feel terrified about their existence in America? Go to their communities and say, hey, free gun safety class. We're going to train you how to use a gun, train you how to use it safely. We're going to teach you all about the different types of guns, and we're going to show you how you can buy one and use it legally within your state.
Right. Or if you live in a state where you can't have personal weapons or body
Right.
armor or anything, you can offer free self-defense classes, like how to get out of a grip, grapple, or whatever.
My point is not necessarily just self-defense.
No, I know.
But I think that would be a politically smart play, because not only are you going to say, hey, we're so not white supremacists that we want black people to be armed in high numbers. That's number one. But number two, in the states where black people can freely own guns, just like everyone else in that state, I think black people from other states like New York are going to see that and be like, wait a minute. The white people are teaching the black people in Alabama how to use guns, and they're encouraging them to own arms, and our state isn't allowing us to. I think refocusing, like, to the extent that systemic racism exists, it's all in the government. The government taking away your right to own arms, the government forcing you to go to poorly run schools because of the district you live in, you know? So it's like, we need to present this conservative argument. Like, we want black people to have I want 100% of every black adult that's not a felon to own a weapon.
Right.
Because it's good politically, it's good for natural rights, the natural right to own a firearm and self-defense with lethal force, right? But then also, it demonstrates that this white supremacy narrative is just bogus.
Well, and that's interesting that you bring that up, because there is only one government official that I can think of who has actually done this, and that's Mark Robinson. He's the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. He became the lieutenant governor of North Carolina because he said that, well, he went to his council members or whoever and was complaining that they were trying to pass these more restrictive gun laws because some shooting had happened in North Carolina. And he said, so you want to take away my right to defend myself and own my guns, that the Constitution protects me. You know, I am allowed to have these under the protection of the Constitution. You want to do that because someone who looks like me used it in a wrong way. And he won over a lot of people by doing that, because he's a black man in a southern state. Well, I guess North Carolina.
It's kind of borderline.
It's both, I guess. But he said, you want to take that away from me because of somebody else who looks like me. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And so the people of North Carolina were like, that's our guy. He's been censored heavily, as you can imagine. But he does run on that platform of getting black people and white people to take personal responsibility and protect themselves and arm themselves, because it's their constitutional right, and it is the best way to make sure that people will not harass you or mess with you or try to murder you if they know that you have a weapon.
Yeah. And this shooter said explicitly in his manifesto that he specifically chose a place where there were likely to be no guns because he was scared. He was scared.
Exactly.
So this guy is a coward. He didn't want to go anywhere where the likelihood of him getting shot at was high. And he still got shot at. Now, he had body armor, which it's a totally separate issue. But yeah, I think it makes those kind of attacks less likely to happen, because I do think these people are inherently cowards, and they're not going to, they want to take their life on their own terms most times. They don't want to be taken down by somebody else when they're going to go and do this.
Right.
But also, just like the crime that is prevalent in many black communities, I think you might see a secondary effect of that stuff being stunted too, because of the proliferation of private ownership among the peaceful community members, right? So it's like, I just think there's so many benefits to doing that. And I just want to live in an America where, like, the Black Panther political organization gets their AR-15s, straps it to their chests, and walks to their state capital. Because it's like, that's just, you're exercising your First Amendment, freedom of association. I don't agree with the Black Panthers, the modern day Black Panthers, right? Exercising your First Amendment, freedom of association, exercising your Second Amendment, right to bear arms, in an open carry state, going down your state capital saying, look, we're all black, we're all armed.
They used to... The Black Panthers, at their origination, they used to carry weapons openly, and they would wander the streets, and they were policing their own communities, because when there was segregation, the police really weren't doing their jobs to protect those communities. So the Black Panthers came about because they needed protection in their communities. So they did open carry because they were legally allowed to. And now we don't see that ever. We don't see communities policing their own communities. We see outside police officers coming in who don't know the community and probably don't care. But then you also see gangs who have illegal weapons or don't necessarily have the right or they do have the right, but the state has said that they have been stripped of those rights to carry those weapons for whatever reason. And they're policing each other and their community, but they're doing it through fear instead of, I hate to use this word, but instead of empowerment of the community.
Yeah. And I think guns are empowering. I mean, it's like you are no longer reliant on the government for the most basic protection of your family and for your community. That is actually what real empowerment is.
Yes.
You have the power of life and death in your hands, and you can use it to protect your life.
Right.
That's...
Well, and I think it is the job and the role of the community itself, maybe not necessarily to police itself, but to protect itself.
Yeah.
The basis of a strong community is self-protection, because you cannot be reliant on your police or your emergency services to come in and rescue you in a dangerous situation. You need to be able to teach yourself and your neighbors and your children how to do that for yourselves. Because if your entire community is well-informed and well-trained and well-guarded, no one is going to mess with you within or without of the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, where's the right-wing personalities that are pushing this? Like, if you're an average rural white person who's scared about the government taking your guns for good reason, shouldn't even if you're just totally interested in self-preservation, getting hands into the gun, getting guns into the hands of as many legal adults as possible across all racial groups is the best way to do that. Because once a majority of black people have guns, once a majority of Asians have guns, that's it. You're exercising the Second Amendment maximally. As soon as the government tries to propose like an assault weapons ban, now you can say, well, that's racist. What, the black people got their guns all of a sudden, and now you want to do gun control? It's just like, and no one's going to take it, right? Because when people know what a gun is and how to use it and they're comfortable with it, they find out it's not that scary. They find out that it's a useful tool to have. It's a nice insurance policy. And yeah, the government doesn't have a right to restrict me from having this. Who are you, right? So it's like...
Well, that's probably why... we don't encourage black people who could legally have a gun in their state to have them, because of that very reason, because the Democrats don't want to give away any political power or show their cards in any way. So if all of a sudden black people are comfortable with that, they're going to go, now we can't do any gun control, because the black people are the vocal majority. I mean, they are the ones that are going to say when something is not right with their community. And I think white people need to get better at doing that, and Asian people. Like, if there's something they're not happy with, we should be just as loud and complaining to our government officials just as loudly. But black people, they'll let you know when they are not happy with something. And that's how they are so quick to affect change. So I think all you need to do is knock over one domino within the black community and say, this is for you. This is for your protection. You are an American citizen. Yes, slavery was a horrible previous lifetime that was decades ago, centuries ago. You are now a full-blooded American citizen. Your family has been for generations. You should now be taking up what is yours from the Constitution and saying, we were brought here unwillingly, but we're going to take this country for what it's got. And that includes the right to self-defense.
Yeah.
I think all it takes is one community to do that. And then I think you could see a big flood of that happening.
It just needs a grassroots, maybe right-wing funded, mobilization to get guns into the hands of black people, but it doesn't have to be overtly political. Just like, hey, you feel unsafe in your community for whatever reason because of white supremacy or because of the policing. We're going to do a gun workshop. There you go. Right.
Well, and I think it's a big fallacy to make the Constitution itself into a political issue.
Right.
Because the Constitution doesn't have political party. It just is. And then from there, your political parties derive meaning, which is why we have the Supreme Court to parse out constitutional law. But I think trying to make the Constitution itself a political issue is only going to lead to the downfall of our country, ultimately.
Yeah. Our natural rights are for every American, regardless of color, and regardless for the reason. You don't need a special reason to exercise your first. You could get a gun totally for the wrong reasons because you're scared a white supremacist is going to shoot you. You still can exercise that right. No problems. So going off of this conversation, I'm going to bring up this article in CNN. It's opinion piece. It says, I'm a middle-aged black father. I want to ask white teen males this question. And this is by, does that say Keith McGee?
Keith, it's probably Maggie. But
Keith McGee.
DD Megadoodoo.
Yeah. So this is by Keith McGee, and
yeah.
I'm just going to start reading some excerpts here.
Okay.
So first one. I am a middle-aged African-American father reeling from the sheer horror of what happened to members of my community in Buffalo. Through my pain, I am praying for all of the victims and their traumatized families, friends, and neighbors, and for all the minority Americans who are feeling even more afraid now than they did before. Again, like we talked about, that fear might be a little bit misplaced or a little bit overemphasized, but it's still genuine, I'm sure. And obviously the shooting is a tragedy. And if you, like the alleged shooter, are a white teenage male, I want you to know that I'm also praying for you. So he's starting out somewhat magnanimous, right? But it's kind of worrying how he's using the white teenage male descriptor. So let's see where this goes.
Oh, boy.
So he goes on to say, this is after a couple paragraphs. Meanwhile, many of the social norms your grandparents almost certainly felt bound by are being swept away. This can be destabilizing, perhaps even intimidating, but it's also a great gift for young men of your generation. So he's alluding to the fact that the structures of power that our grandparents had as white people are no longer, there for us as young white men or white teenage males.
I don't know if you've ever met a black grandmother, but they're some of the toughest women on their grandchildren.
Yeah, he's talking about white grandparents.
No, I know. He's saying that they had the power structure.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen a couple of black grandparents, but they do not let you get away with anything.
Right.
And they have worked very hard to build what they have.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about power, look no further than the nuclear black family 2 generations ago.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, he's obviously coming at this from a systemic racism approach.
Of course.
And he says, after all, it is no longer taboo in large swaths of American society to question and be open about your sexuality. So he's talking about the opening up of society, the breakdown of these structures of power enables all of this stuff. But again, he's assuming that the ability to be open and about your sexuality is like a good.
I just don't know why that came out of left field. It was like, we're talking about race, and now all of a sudden we're talking about sexuality. Throw that in there, too.
Yeah, so maybe I took too much out. But what he was saying is, like, because the breakdowns of these structures of power are happening, yes, it's scary for you as a white man to start losing the power that you historically have had, but that breakdown of the structures of power is also enabling other gifts, like being open about your sexuality. Okay. So he's saying that the breakdown of the old structure is both bad and good for white young men.
Okay.
But I don't think that being open about your sexuality and being able to be promiscuous and sleep with whoever you want, I don't think that's a good thing. So he's not exactly making a great argument here, in my opinion.
I also have a sinking feeling that this is not an argument made in good faith either.
Well, we'll see. So he says, and if you choose well, your partner or spouse will value your mental health over your ability to always appear brave and strong. So these are all left-wing talking points about power structures, right? And then he says, however, not everything has changed. Not yet. And so he goes on to say, So he goes on to say, because you are male, you were born a winner of the patriarchal jackpot. You are more likely to rise to the top of the career ladder and will be better paid on your way up. The state will not attempt to dictate what you can and cannot do with your own body. Excuse me, a white man that currently occupies the Oval Office tried to get me to take a vaccine forcibly that I didn't want.
Right.
And so he says, you are more likely to rise to the top of the career ladder and will be better paid on your way up. So, of course, what he's talking about is the racial disparities in incomes. Which, if you're...
And probably the sex disparities as well.
Right. So if you're a midwit and you look at the racial disparities by statistics, there is a racial disparity in incomes and generational wealth and all that stuff.
Sure.
What he's saying is, that's evidence of systemic racism. That there must be a built-in, baked-in bias that favors white people. But of course, where this argument falls apart is Asian Americans are far higher than white people on average income and generational wealth. Far higher. Jews. Right. Far higher.
Right.
They're not counted as white sometimes.
Yeah.
But also immigrants from places like Nigeria also score way higher in all those statistics than white people.
Or South Africa.
So his argument makes sense if you forget the entire causality of that disparity, if you throw all that out the window and you eliminate all the other racial groups from the statistics, then that's the only sense in which his argument makes any sense whatsoever.
Right.
But of course, you include the other racial groups and it becomes clear there's not a baked-in favorability towards white people because white people would be on the top.
And also, the problem is not that you're black. The problem is that your schools keep lessening standards.
Mm-hmm.
So if your black students graduate from high school, they're probably not even literate.
Mm-hmm.
How are they supposed to get a high-paying job if they can't read?
Mm-hmm. Or if the culture is such that you don't value school.
Right. If it's more valuable for you to go and make money on the street and drop out of high school, then you're not going to get a high-paying job as a CEO somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm remembering my time in grade school and high school, and we all knew white kids who had parents that were super strict. You get anything less than an A+, and like you're gonna get a lot of guff for that, right? And then we also knew white kids who didn't try at all, who failed everything because their parents didn't care about them.
Exactly.
And then of course, like every Asian kid was doing amazingly because
oh my
that's
gosh,
the culture.
I had so many Indian kids in my class, and it was like they all got straight A's, but they would fight each other about decimal percentage points on assignments. Like they all got 100%, but it might have been 100.01, and then the other one got 100.02 or whatever. It was like, oh my God.
Right. Well, the point here is that, you can associate stereotypes with races, right?
Sure.
But the race is not the determining factor. It's what is your home life like?
Right.
How much emphasis are your parents pushing you to do well in school?
Right.
The quality of the school, I'm sure, has something to do with it too. Like, if I was going to make an argument about systemic racism, I would say what I alluded to earlier, which is that the government is forcing black families to attend terrible schools because they don't have the wealth to move to a better neighborhood. They can't afford the property taxes in the house or whatever. And the school's funding is based on property taxes. So you got a school in the middle of a poor neighborhood. The school's not going to get any funding. The school's going to be terrible. It's going to be filled with crime. And you have no choice. You can't afford private school. So your kids go to this garbage school and surprise, they don't turn out well. So it's not hard to see how the government actually has the boot on the backs of these specific communities because they literally have no options. They are stuck in an unwinnable position. So I have sympathy for that situation.
Right.
And that's why I support school choice. I want black families to be able to send their kids wherever because I think, you can only do so much as a black parent to instill the importance of education in your kid. But if the school is just terrible, like you're not going to get that far with that.
Right.
You might be able to convince your kid to like do the work, which is probably really easy, and stay out of trouble. But that's like the best you can do because if the school isn't high quality, then it's like there's going to be no opportunities. There's going to be none of that.
Well, and it's not to say that only majority black high schools have a problem with education standards. We have a national crisis in education standards. I mean, our 12th grade high school graduates are graduating at a 33% literacy rate. So it's a problem nationwide. It's just you see it magnified within black communities because of the low funding, because of what's the
inner city?
The low quality education and also the lessening of standards.
Right.
As well as the community cultural differences where school is not valued.
Right.
Because, if your parent is saying school is important, but then your buddies in your gang are saying, no, it's not, you're probably going to listen to your buddies in the gang more than you're going to listen to your poor mother because she's your mom and what does she know? Because you're a teenager and teenagers don't listen to their parents anyway.
And she's probably also likely a single mom.
Right.
She's probably also likely not very educated either.
Right.
Just like as a consequence of that environment.
Right. It's really hard to get out of that environment initially. It's like Jordan Peterson says all the time, if you have none, it's really hard to get some.
Right.
But once you have some, it's easier to get a lot more.
Right.
But it's really difficult to just be the initial breaker from that cycle.
Yeah, and to the extent that those types of barriers exist, I'm all in favor of eliminating those. Like, get the government out of the way.
Yes.
Because I think the government's the huge problem here.
Always.
It's always
Always.
like, if you ever wonder why there's a problem in society, you should be looking at the government first as the source of the problem, not the source of the fix.
Of course, they're trying to use white people and white supremacy and whiteness as the scapegoat for all of these problems, instead of airing the actual problems that come from structural problems within the government.
Right.
And funding and all of these different things.
But you look at, like, our mom, she grew up in a trailer park. She didn't go to a great school. I mean...
Sorry to out you, Mom.
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have been that great of a school, though. It's like, it's rural, a rural area. There's probably not that many opportunities at the school. It's probably really tiny. So, like, even rural white people deal with this problem, too, of having no opportunities.
And also, her mom didn't really care if she did her schoolwork or anything. And so our mom did not do very well in school. She hated school. She did not like to read. She didn't want to do her homework. She's told me many times that she would just sit and cry before she could even get her homework done because she hated it so much.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few decades and a couple decades, she graduated from college when we were kids.
Right.
And she loves learning now. She reads all the time on her own. So it's not that she's incapable of it.
Right.
It's just that
it was hard to get started.
It was hard to get started.
And then we had a really good opportunity with the schools that we went to. And so we just had that much of a leg up. So it's like, we need to somehow figure out how to get that first generation jump started. Like, get people to get educated, value the education. Yeah, they may not in that lifetime end up, near the top, but their children are going to be starting from a much better position.
Right.
And so, yeah, to the extent that we can make governmental changes to facilitate that process, I'm fully on board. But it's, it also is a cultural problem, though. You need to start seeing the value in the education and pushing your kids to do better.
Well, and to his point about, because he mentions the patriarchal jackpot or whatever, he's also trying to make the case that women are not paid as much, but he forgets that we don't like working.
Yeah.
We want to stay home.
Yeah, I definitely hear from you and Mother more often than from the men in my life that you don't want to work anymore.
Well, because we just have different motivations.
Right.
Men enjoy working because it makes them money and they like the money. I don't like working. I hate it. I hate it. I just want to be home. I can get so much more done at home that my fiance does not like to do, and that he doesn't notice that I do either. But I feel better when I do it. And it actually allows our household to run and function.
Yeah.
That's what women like to do. So yeah, we're not going to get paid as much because we don't work.
Right.
We don't do it. We don't like to. And if a woman says she wants to work, she's lying. Because guess what? Give her 2 months of not working and just give her an allowance. This is a hypothetical, but if our freaking family structures were still set up appropriately, this is how it would be. Give her 2 months where she doesn't have to worry about finances and she doesn't have to go to work. Try to make her go back after those 2 months are over. You won't do it. It won't go over well. It'll go over like a lead balloon, okay? I'm just saying. Women who want to work are liars.
I didn't say it. It was coming from the mouth of a female herself.
Smash that like button if you agree.
And if you disagree, smash the like button.
Anyway.
So he goes on to say, so after making that statement about the state will not attempt to dictate what you can and cannot do with your own body, he then goes on to say, on top of that, because you are white and you live in a country that is structurally racist, you enjoy the huge privilege your skin color gives you. And so let's go on to the final excerpt I have here. If you have the added bonus of being Christian, heterosexual, cisgender, and able-bodied, there's more leftist language in there, then you might well never know firsthand how it feels to be stigmatized, marginalized, and or hated because of some aspect of yourself over which you have absolutely no control. Objection, Your Honor. I recall being called a racist, Nazi, white supremacist because I voted for a certain orange man thrice. I voted for him in the primaries because I'm based as hell.
I couldn't vote in the primaries because I wasn't old enough.
That's true.
But
so I was called all that. I was stigmatized for that. I couldn't talk to certain people in my friend group because it would have just subjected me to unfair attacks. Yep. So I do know what that's like. I also know what it's like to want to make my own bodily decision regarding wearing a mask or getting vaccinated, and not being able to talk about those things because I would be smeared as anti-science or, gooberish or something.
Right.
But do you see what I mean? Like, he's pretending like white people can never experience stigmatization. Of course we can. Everyone can.
Also, the able-bodied thing gets my goat.
Right.
Because please go up to a seemingly able-bodied veteran from recent wars. I'm talking Afghanistan. I'm talking Iraq, Syria. You all right over there? I'm dying. You got some water in your lungs? Talk to vets or even the Gulf War. Combat veterans. They probably don't have any hearing. They probably have a lot of demons that they're fighting. They can still work, but a lot of them are on partial disability, even though they're working. Please go up to them and say that they have any kind of privilege.
Right.
Because they are struggling every day.
Right.
And a lot of them are white, Christian, heterosexual, and cisgender, he says, which is just...
made up.
It's just made up. It's just being your sex. They deal with all of those things every day. And they would not say that they are privileged because of the hell that they have literally been through.
Right. Well, what about all these older white guys too that haven't taken care of themselves, so they're overweight, but they work in blue collar, manual labor jobs, construction or whatever. And they've got all kinds of issues. They're tearing ligaments all the time. They're
on a million medications for heart, cholesterol, whatever.
Exactly. And, there's an element of personal responsibility to that too, but they keep working despite the fact that they're severely overweight. They might have some permanent injury or permanent semi-disability.
They probably qualify for disability,
right,
and they
don't do
still work.
Right. And it's like, those are people who you're calling privileged, but they have jobs and lifestyles that I wouldn't ever accept for myself.
And they won't accept a dime from anybody.
Right.
Which is why they don't get on disability, because they don't want to take from the government because it's taking from their fellow Americans.
Right.
They don't do that. It is not in their nature. It's not in their raising. They will not do it. And they also don't ever complain about their situation.
Right. And also this term able-bodied, like everyone has some kind of quirk that makes them unable to do something physically.
Yeah.
Like my skeleton is all fuckered.
Yeah.
And, instead of dwelling on it and complaining about it, my life, I just accepted, there's some things that I'm not going to be able to do as well as other people because of my physique. And so I found a niche for myself, and that's sitting at the computer all day doing software engineering. But it's like adopting this sort of label for yourself just gives you a vector by which you can avoid responsibility. You say, well, I'm not whatever the definition of able-bodied is. I'm not able-bodied, so I can't do X, Y, and Z, and I can't work. It's like, I guess you could do that and maybe convince the government that you're not able-bodied and collect disability, but what kind of life are you going to be living?
Yeah.
Are you going to be just like sitting at home collecting government money, watching Netflix all day? That's the life you want to live?
It's so purposeless.
Yeah, it's like, shouldn't we be convincing people to triumph in spite of whatever disadvantages they might have as an individual? Like, isn't that the entire idea of the United States? That you triumph in spite? This is why Americans love underdogs.
Right.
We like the disadvantaged people to become the ultimate victors. We're ready, willing, and able to cheer people on like that, but they have to want it.
Yeah.
You can't be using these labels to just disregard responsibility and collect free money and do nothing with your life. We're not going to cheer for you. Right. We're going to disdain you, actually, because we don't want that. Right. We want underdogs that win. Like there's I just thought of this. There's like a disabled guy. He's like in a chair and I don't know what disease he has, but he makes memes of himself all the time. He's a YouTuber and he's like, he's disabled to the point where like his legs are super tiny and shriveled up and his arms don't work right.
I think I know who you're talking about.
I don't know what his name is.
He makes like videos, like TikToks and stuff too, where he does jokes and...
Yeah, but he's like an internet personality off the back of making fun of himself for his disability, and people love him.
Yeah.
They're not making fun of him.
No.
He's creating awesome content that's hilarious and people love it.
He's a national treasure.
Exactly. And it's like, that guy has every right to say, well, I'm just going to sit in this chair and live an uneventful life, but he didn't. He chose to do something.
Yeah.
And what he did was...
put himself out there, and it worked out in his favor.
Exactly. And that's admirable, that person is going to be adored by nearly everyone.
Yeah, I just hate this idea that if you appear to have these labels that other people want to assign to you, somehow that disqualifies you for receiving any sympathy.
Yeah.
If your life situation were to turn into a poor one, all of a sudden it's like, well, you're heterosexual, Christian, white man, whatever, so I don't feel bad for you, even though you're homeless, you have a drug addiction, or you're an alcoholic, or you have PTSD and you have nowhere to go.
Or you're divorced and you don't get to see your kids.
Yeah. Or you lost your dog in the divorce. Like, even
Right.
something as simple as that, it's like, well, you're a man, so just deal with it. But then at the same time, he's saying you don't have to be brave and strong all the time.
Right.
Except that you do. If you're a white Christian heterosexual man, you are not allowed to show any kind of weakness, because then they just go, oh, those are crocodile tears and you're just trying to garner sympathy from everybody else, but you have it so much better because you have all this privilege. It's like, which one is it?
Yeah.
Do you want men to be brave and strong and put on a front, or do you want them to show their emotion when things get hard?
Right. This is what leftists do. They just identify an enemy and they don't care how they eliminate that enemy. They'll just play totally inconsistent, logical games to get the end that they want, which is white people losing the perceived power that they have in society. So they don't care.
Well, that's why I don't think this is a good faith argument that he's writing either, because he starts the article by trying to gain the trust of these young white teenagers. But then he immediately flips and starts accusing them of being all of these things.
Yeah.
So it's not in good faith. He says he's praying for them and that he wants them to find a good spouse and all this stuff. It's like, you don't actually believe any of that. You could care less if these teenage boys end up in a ditch dead somewhere.
Right.
Because then it'd be one less white person on the planet. You don't care. So I don't like this fake trust that he's trying to gain.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
It is. Yeah, just to cap off this story with final words from him. So he says, you don't know how firsthand how it feels to be stigmatized, all that stuff. He says, that makes you very lucky indeed. So I already object to the premise that white people are incapable of feeling stigmatized.
Right.
My question to you is this. What are you going to do with all that luck? Again, don't agree with the premise that white people are inherently more lucky than anyone else. You know, if you're socioeconomically well off, then yeah, you're going to have more opportunities. But yeah, a white person that grows up in a trailer park, it's hard to see how they have any more luck than a person growing up in the inner city.
Right.
And he says, you are seen by some other white male Americans as being part of an exclusive club. Again, totally illogical. I don't think...
Is there a club?
Yeah.
You didn't tell me about that.
Well, if there is a club, I don't want to be in it because that would mean Joe Biden's in it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what? This is like...
It's called the KKK.
It's like, this is the problem.
And he is in it.
So pernicious, though. It's like, he's assuming that all white people feel the same things. There are white people that I despise. Black Lives Matter, pro-abortion white people that I would want nothing to do with. There are people who are just like slush brains like Biden that I want nothing to do with, right? And there are people that even agree with my political worldview that I want nothing to do with in my personal life, right? So it's like, what club? What exclusive club? We all share some common privilege, despite the fact that there are left-wing white people trying to decry their privilege and right-wing white people that are just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
like,
basically.
It's like we have all this shared privilege and yet some of us can't see it anywhere. Some of us disagree with like, it's just so incoherent. You're trying to lump in an entire race of people.
Yeah.
And assume that they all think or have the same experiences. That's the definition of racism, right?
Well, this other misleading half of the same coin is that in the black community, there's racism within the black community. It's called colorism.
Yeah.
Because if you're too dark, you're a problem. If you're too light, you're a problem. If you're right in the middle, you're a problem. It's like if you were a different shade of the same brown, all of a sudden you're different. And there's colorism within that community.
Yeah.
As much as we can call a race a community. And we don't talk about that. They just want to lump all black people together and act like there are no problems between black people. Even though black people kill each other more than any other race kills black people. It's like, what? You have problems
Right.
that you need to sort out.
And then you can be black like Clarence Thomas, but you're actually not black because you like the Constitution and rights.
Or Candace Owens.
Or Candace, or
They're actually just white.
Or Larry Elder.
They have whiteness.
And then let's just finish this off here. So he says, you are seen by some other white male Americans as part of being an exclusive club, the membership of which gives you the ability to subjugate other less fortunate citizens. So it's just, yeah, he's basically just saying like, somehow me being white, a young white male, I have luck that is invisible to me, that I haven't noticed on basis of my skin color. I have the ability to subjugate people. Like I could just go out into the street and like enslave somebody right there. Like,
I feel like you'd be shot on sight.
Right. It's like, what am I doing in my day-to-day life? I'm voting for people. And I think that's where they're coming from. They're like, oh, well, if you vote for the candidates that we don't like, then you are upholding white supremacy. They just use it as a bludgeon to dissuade their political opponents. It's like, I literally don't even remember the last time I've supported a race-based anything. The only people supporting race-based policies are people that are in favor of affirmative action.
Yeah.
But then that discriminates against Asian people more than it discriminates against white people. So it's like,
I don't think there's anything that I have ever supported either that because of race.
Right.
Like there was nothing where I was like, oh, it's black owned, so I'm going to go in there and buy something.
Right.
Or it wasn't like, oh, well, you're white and I'm white, so I'm going to do this thing. Like I've never, I don't know, maybe that's just because it's how we were raised, because we were raised to actually not discriminate.
Right.
Not being discriminatory means if your product is shit, I'm not going to buy it. Or if it's good quality, I'll buy it.
Right.
It goes both ways.
It's just like, they're seeing racism and racial structures everywhere where there are none.
Yeah.
There just aren't. Like, yeah, there's a history in this country. Yeah, there are some race issues. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
But to say that that's all part of a broad structure of like some secret cabal of white people that are holding on to power and benefiting white people only, it's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
What are you talking about?
You know, we were raised to not discriminate, but just to play devil's advocate here, I could see how I would not see racism in the country because I'm not black. So if you're black and you're growing up and you have had a couple of minor incidents of racism, like you were a little kid growing up and some older white dude called you the N-word, that's probably happened to a lot of people. That was mild racism. I just don't see how it has become such a big monster behemoth thing.
Right.
Because the only thing I can compare it to is when I've had mild incidences of sexism.
Yeah.
Which I have had because I am a girl.
Right.
But I don't make it my entire person. I'm not like, it's the patriarchy's fault.
Right.
I just go, okay, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah, and I think that's just,
It has nothing to do with the whole structure of the world. Because I also know a lot of men who have treated me very well in my life. Actually, most men that I've encountered have treated me very well in my life. But there's always going to be an asshole who says something stupid. And you're like, okay, whatever.
And the issue is humans are hardwired to remember negative things.
Right.
We remember negative things much more potently than we remember good things.
Right.
So like you could have 10 good interactions with a man on the street and then one comment from a pig.
Yeah.
Like ruins your day.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's just how humans are. But also like people, if they're going to be assholes, they typically do it on the basis of visible characteristics.
Right.
So it's like you are visibly in a racial minority group. And so if somebody's going to be an asshole, they're probably going to target that because it's the most obvious thing. But you see it with even non-racial or sex-based issues like mask wearing. If people didn't wear masks during the pandemic when it was expected to, they were shouted at. They were called anti-science lunatics. It's just like, it doesn't necessarily matter what your motivation for being an asshole is. If you're going to be, you're going to point out something that's obviously making the other person different than you.
Right.
That's what humans do.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, you might be black and you might have encountered some racial comments, but I just don't think that's indicative of a more deep-seated white supremacy issue. It's probably just indicative of one person being an asshole who found something noticeable to attack you with.
Right, which is kind of my point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have never attributed negative sexist comments to be a problem with our entire society.
Right.
I just go, that guy is, in his own world and is just being an ass.
Yep.
So I don't see how that wouldn't be the same thing for racial issues, because our structures are not built to be inherently racist. If that were the case, then black people couldn't buy homes, they couldn't get jobs, they wouldn't go to school, but they can do all of those things.
And black immigrants wouldn't be doing better than white people.
And black immigrants probably wouldn't be allowed in the country.
Yeah.
So I just think it's just a fallacy. And I mean, they know that it's a fallacy, but they peddle it anyway.
Yep. All right.
Anyway.
And that was a good
moving on to some better news.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is from The Guardian. They're asking everyone for donations now because it's The Guardian. This is about Nancy Pelosi. San Francisco Archbishop bars Pelosi from communion over abortion stance. And to that I say, good.
Good.
I have been wanting this to happen for years now.
Yep.
Ultra conservative.
He's a freaking Catholic bishop.
Yeah, archbishop, actually.
Oh, true.
Salvatore Cordileone accuses pro-choice House Speaker of failing to understand the grave evil she is perpetrating. And he wrote, or this was kind of a long article, but this is the only really important part of it. And it reads, the Roman Catholic Archbishop is in Nancy Pelosi's hometown of San Francisco, has banned her from receiving communion there over her staunch support of abortion rights, which she has strengthened as Supreme Court justices weigh finalizing a draft ruling outlawing the termination of pregnancies in more than half the country, which is not a true statement at all, but that's not really the point.
Right.
So she cannot receive communion in her church in San Francisco, but I believe the one in DC is still allowing her to receive communion.
Right. It's just because that archbishop only has the San Francisco diocese under his management.
Right. It goes on. In a letter addressed to the U.S. House Speaker and posted on his Twitter account, ultra-conservative Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone argued that Pelosi's, quote, position on abortion has become only more extreme over the years, especially in the last few months, end quote. And he had decided to block her from communion after she had ignored his request to explain her stance to him.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just ignore your archbishop.
Especially if you're a devout Catholic, quote unquote.
Right. My problem has been that, so a couple years ago, I took an online religion class and we had to do, we had to find relevant articles about cultural issues in religion that were like posted that month or that week or whatever. They had to be up to date. And everyone in that class had it out for the Catholics, man. And you always had to write about the post that you found and then respond to two others. I responded to every anti-Catholic post that there was because all of these young people were talking about Catholic canon and Catholic religion, and they knew nothing about it. They're like, I don't think it's right that Catholics should be barred from communion if they do this, that, the other thing. And I'm like, that's the whole point. Mm-hmm. This church is set up in a very strict hierarchy with very strict canonic law. If you deviate from that, you're not actually a Catholic.
Right. Until
you repent and do your penance and do your confession and make up with the church and God in the eyes of the Catholic Church. There are rules and procedures you have to follow. If you fail to follow those or you refuse to follow those, you are not permitted to receive the sacrament of Holy Communion, and you are not permitted to be considered a Catholic until you are back in good standing with the church. And no one understood this. They're like, well, I think the church should just reform its laws. That's not how it works.
This is the reason, though. This is the reason why the laws are in place is like, yeah, people think that they're kind of like weird or whatever, but the rationale that I've seen is that when the bishops, so you can't do communion when you are in a state of grave moral sin.
Right.
And the reason is because Catholics believe that that's the body and blood of Jesus himself.
Right.
And participating in that ritual while you are complicit in an act of grave moral sin is more damaging to your soul.
Right.
So they're doing it not because they have some arbitrary rules, because they want to save you from doing more damage to your eternal soul.
Right.
They say you cannot, this is sacrilege. You
Right.
cannot do this if you are not living life as a proper Christian
Right.
or a proper Catholic. So the reason, it sounds kind of arbitrary, but their rationale is, we cannot have you damaging your prospects at eternal life with Jesus and God. We just can't enable that. We
Right.
have to give you the message that you cannot do this. You are damning yourself,
Right.
essentially.
Well, and that's the point of the Catholic hierarchy. It's supposed to be these barriers and blockades to protect you from yourself, essentially. And yes, there's been a lot of corruption in the Catholic Church, and I understand that's probably where a lot of this anger towards the Catholic Church comes from. But all of these anti-Catholic arguments, or all of these anti-canonic law arguments, are coming from people who don't understand the history of the Catholic Church from its beginnings, and they don't understand the purpose of the laws and the hierarchy within the church. They just make these blanket statements about how the church is evil and they shouldn't have this much control over their people, and they just don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
To be fair, there's a lot that I don't know. Even having grown up Catholic and learned a lot as a child, there's still it's such a rich religion and history. It would be almost impossible to know everything.
Yes.
Unless you're the Pope. And even then, looking at the Pope we have now, I'm not sure that he does understand it all.
Even if you are a Pope, I would imagine that's like being a lawyer. Like you know how to practice law, but that doesn't mean that you know every law that's on the books.
That's true, yes.
If the Pope probably can recite to you or derive the canon law from his understanding of the faith.
Sure.
But he probably doesn't know exactly what everything says in that law.
Right.
But he knows how to find it. He knows how to interpret it. He knows how to modify it if necessary.
Right.
So it's like, it's just like anything. As a person, you can't possibly know everything.
Well, and it's just, there's too much to that religion.
Yeah.
I feel like to know everything. But anyway, the last paragraph of this says, Coeur de Leon, San Francisco's Archbishop since 2012, accused Pelosi of failing to, quote, understand the grave evil she is perpetrating, the scandal she is causing, and the danger to her own soul she is risking, end quote. So that's exactly what you were saying. He is not doing it out of maliciousness. He is doing it because she might be causing evil to arise in other people who follow her example, who are Catholic or say they are Catholic, and she's also doing damage to herself. Not just her public image, but her eternal soul and salvation.
Right.
He said he would need to stop her from receiving communion until she, quote, publicly repudiates her support for abortion. And I imagine she would also have to do some kind of penance as well.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly, like, if you get barred from, I'm sure somebody has to review it. Like, if somebody bars you from receiving communion, then you probably have to go through some procedure to regain the privilege to do it.
I imagine you have to go to confession for a certain length of time, like once a week for 6 months, or maybe you just go to confession once and they give you a pretty lengthy penance that you have to perform before you can go back to the Archbishop and say, I've done my penance. And then you have to do confession again, I would imagine. I don't really know how that works because they really don't bar members of the church from receiving communion that often. It really is like a last ditch thing before excommunication. Like, they really don't do that often.
Right.
It's almost unheard of. So, because it's not really the church's place to say if you can or can't receive the body of Christ if you're in good standing. So they can't just take it away from you for no reason. Like, you have to be doing something against canon.
And they only know
to have
that
it taken away
if you have a public stance, right? Because you could be privately in a situation of grave moral sin that's unknown to everyone.
Right. I mean, they don't know unless you're going to confession regularly, which Catholics are supposed to do that as well.
Right.
But if you aren't doing that, then you're sinning in multiple ways then. But the church can only do what they can if they know about it.
Right.
And I wish the DC church that she reportedly goes to would do the same thing, but they never will because I'm sure it's a very liberal Catholic church.
Right. Well, there's obviously the human corruption elements too of it, right? Like
Right.
you can't alienate your congregation because guess what? Then the tithing is gonna the donations to the church
Right.
are gonna fall steeply. So there are still human motivations at work, and the church, by the nature of it being a political or a human organization, is going to be political in itself.
Right.
Right. So it's like you can have the most beautiful canon law or whatever, but then it's still going to come down to what's the individual human interaction like,
I think this is a good step, though.
Yeah.
I don't think Pelosi will ever revoke her stance. No. I don't think this archbishop is ever going to allow her to receive communion in his diocese again. But unfortunately, there are other dioceses that she can go to and still receive communion and be as sacrilegious as she'd like. But I think it's good that he's making an example of her and bringing it to the public's attention that he's done this, because it might make Catholics think twice about their stance, or it at least reveals Pelosi's motivations and where she stands on this issue and where she stands as a Catholic, so she says.
Yep. All right. Do you want to just go through monkeypox real quick before we end this?
I admittedly don't know much about it because I heard about a new disease and I just went...
Yeah, that's kind of what I did too. That's why I'm saying like this is not going to take long. I just want to bring this to the forefront so people are aware of it.
Sure.
So we have a monkeypox outbreak. Basically, it seems to be spreading among gay and bisexual men because it needs contact with bodily fluids. It's apparently fairly deadly. Not as deadly as smallpox, but somewhat near that deadliness.
It's not as deadly as smallpox, and we can control smallpox. I'm not really concerned.
Well, here's the thing, though. So you should be concerned because there's a lot of extra meta stuff going on around it. So Joe Biden says everybody should be concerned, and this article doesn't really say much except Joe Biden is, of course, saying that people should be concerned, which, as you just adequately alluded to, you really shouldn't be because unless you're a gay man, it's not really going to be.
Well, and also if it's not as deadly as smallpox, like what do we have to worry about?
Right, but here's the part about it. So this is from Disclosed TV. This says, in March, it's a tweet. So in March 2021, NTI, which is a organization, I forgot what it stands for, but NTI partnered with the Munich Security Conference to conduct a tabletop exercise simulating a global pandemic involving an unusual strain of monkeypox caused by a terrorist attack using a pathogen engineered in a laboratory. And the video that's linked here is...
What is this, freaking D&D?
I know.
They're role-playing monkeypox?
This is a video that is about that fictional scenario. So I'm just going to play through this real quick. It says this is a fictional scenario.
There are growing questions today around a new and deadly outbreak.
Another global outbreak, but this time
Scientists
it's different.
determined that this monkeypox virus was engineered.
Biological terrorism in one region, unleashed on the rest of the world. There's an ambulance pulling quarantined people into the hospital. Billions of cases, hundreds of millions dead.
With limited antiviral drugs and no known effective treatments, countries around the world are struggling to control another pandemic with already devastating effects.
Poor oversight and gaps in global governance leave us vulnerable to catastrophic biological threats. Can the international community act quickly enough?
We're seeing far fewer cases in countries where governments took early and decisive action.
And some international experts are urging the WHO to adopt a phased approach to warnings.
The time to prepare for the next global pandemic is now. So you can probably already get heebie-jeebies.
I love the cheesy beginning where it's like another global pandemic, but this time it's different. It's like but this time it's personal or whatever.
Right.
So
I'm just throwing this information at you because it really speaks for itself. This is from New York Post. United States buys millions of monkeypox vaccines after Massachusetts confirms case. So I believe it was 13 million doses. So monkeypox literally just happened, and they already have 13 million doses purchased and ready to go. Wow.
But I love in that fictional scenario, they said it was engineered somewhere and then released. Oh, you mean like the thing that we're not allowed to talk about and definitely didn't happen at all, even though people speculated about it in March of 2020 that was a possibility?
Yeah.
Can't call it the Chinese virus. That's racist.
Yep. And you know what I was unable to verify this, so take it with a grain of salt, but on some of the more sketchy news sites that I looked at, this NTI monkeypox exercise was done last year, and their exercise in the example said that the monkeypox outbreak happened in May of 2022. Well, here we are in May of 2022 with a monkeypox outbreak. Very coincidental that it happened to be the same month and the same year that their fictional exercise was going over.
I mean, I know you can't verify that, but it's almost like they're just telling us what they're going to do all the time.
Yeah.
Because didn't Bill Gates a few months ago say that there was going to be another smallpox-like outbreak?
I don't know. I don't follow Bill Gates because he's a demon.
I thought that was a TED Talk that he had done, but
I don't know.
I didn't hear it firsthand.
But so they said, oh, we need global governance and everything like that. So here is from Forbes, the WHO to discuss global pandemic treaty at World Health Assembly, May 22nd to 28th. So this is while they're at Davos or World Economic Forum or whatever. I think it's all related. But they're
World Health Assembly is probably the health arm of the World Economic Forum.
So
that is run by the WHO.
Yeah, so they're going to discuss a global pandemic treaty. And it says here, in commentary published in The Lancet on May 16th, a team of authors, most of whom are from the UK, wrote that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted profound weaknesses in the global governance of health. Inadequate preparation, coordination, and accountability hampered the collective response of nations at each stage. So then it goes on. They asserted that changes to the global health architecture are necessary to mitigate the health and socioeconomic damage of the ongoing pandemic and to prepare for the next major global threat to health. They indicated that success will require clear demarcations of responsibility with a parsimonious role for international institutions. Although a pandemic treaty or alternative new instrument or process cannot solve all that is wrong with global health, it can deliver targeted improvements if supported by effective and clear global governance. So we have the globalists at it yet again.
You know, Charlie Kirk said the other day that red states should just withdraw from the WHO. And I'm waiting for Ron DeSantis to do it.
I don't know how they do that because it's just a federal relationship. I mean, I guess you could do it as like a virtue signal.
Well, I wonder if there's some amount of funding that comes from the states to the federal government that goes toward the WHO. So you might be able to withdraw your funding.
Maybe. I don't know. It's I think it's just a federal issue.
I didn't read the article. I just kind of saw it in passing, but I was like, "Oh, Charlie Kirk said it. Let's see how long it takes DeSantis to put it in action."
Yeah.
Because he's always the one that does it first.
I think what would be more effective is just say just adopt a resolution or something in the state legislatures that says we are going to do our own pandemic planning. We're going to handle the pandemic ourselves, regardless of the recommendations of the federal government or the coercions of that would be far more effective. Because then if the federal government is trying to enact what the WHO is saying, then the states can just be like, well, we already decided as a state that we're not going to listen to you.
Right. Which I think is what they're supposed to do.
That's what they're supposed to do. So this last excerpt I have is, imagine how much suffering could have been avoided and how many lives could have been saved if only countries around the world had been more unified and coordinated with each other to combat the COVID-19 coronavirus. Now, then it goes on to say, what if countries had warned each other earlier about the original SARS-CoV-2 and the emergence of new variants? What if countries had coordinated more on supporting and sharing research? What if they had more effectively pooled together knowledge and resources to further accelerate the development and implementation of new technologies and approaches for virus surveillance, prevention, and treatment? Surveillance is a word that we should underline there. What if governments had banded together to negotiate better terms with vaccine, drug, and test manufacturers? What if countries had worked together to combat misinformation and support science? So they're throwing they're lumping everything they want to do into the World Health Organization. They want global governance, they want mass surveillance, and they want to control misinformation. They're doing that all under the guise of public health. They're not making a secret about it. They're just wrapping it in nice sounding language. And the problem here, of course, is that we can't have a global unified effort. We can't. If being globally unified means instituting quarantine camps like Australia, I want nothing to do with it.
And also there are countries that are not our allies. So why on earth would they ever coordinate anything with us?
Yeah. Well, this is just, I think, the problem. This is why globalism can't work, is because there is no shared global value system.
No.
Australia's fine giving up their guns and having the government forcibly relocate to quarantine camps.
Yeah.
I'm here and I barely want to wear a mask.
Yeah.
I'm like, who the hell are you? Get away from me.
But that's the American scrappiness.
Right. And I'm not going to sacrifice that.
Which no other country has.
I'm not going to sacrifice that for global cooperation. I'm not going to sacrifice that for some globalist treaty. It's not happening. I don't want to do what Australia did. I don't want to do what China's doing. I don't want to do what Canada did. I want to do what the red states in the United States did, which was, here's the facts. You can take care of yourself. You can mitigate your own risk, but we're not going to destroy the economy. We're not going to prevent you from seeing your loved ones. We're not going to shut down the schools. That's how I want to go through a pandemic, not whatever these demons at the WHO want to do.
If we have to go through another pandemic like that, I want to act more like France, just protesting every day in the streets. They were like, forget this.
It's just, globalism can't work. It's a recipe for, forget the moral arguments. It just won't work. It's not going to. Like, we have adversaries on the global stage for a reason. It's because we have different value systems and different desires. You cannot unify us.
Yeah. They can try for decades to make this work, but it'll never work.
Yep. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Their playbook is very clear here. They just want control.
Well, because they've stopped masking it in something else. It's just their playbook is what they're publishing now.
Yeah.
They're not hiding it anymore. They've gotten to a point where, these global organizations and leaders, they just don't care to try anymore, because they feel that enough people are sufficiently brainwashed that they can just say exactly what they mean to do and intend to do. And people will go, oh, well, it seems well-intentioned, so it's probably okay, because they've already set it up to be such.
Yeah.
There's very few people who are looking at this going, what are you talking about?
Right.
It's not very many people at all.
They must
realize. The average American doesn't have their finger on the pulse like we do. They are not paying attention to any of this because they have other things to worry about.
Yeah.
Like gas prices being too high and grocery stores being empty and also costing a lot. So they don't have the energy to focus on this playbook.
Yeah, they must realize that the only people that are going to resist them are half of Americans. Canada tolerates
maybe half.
Yeah, Canada tolerates totalitarianism in the name of public health. Australia tolerates it. Every country in Europe tolerates it. China not only tolerates it, but goes whole hog on the control. So it's like they must just realize, like, oh, we just have to deal with the pesky red Americans, so we can just probably shove it down the world's throat. And like, oh, if a few pockets of the United States, couple of states here and there resist us, that's fine. We'll still get our global control. It's like,
which if there's only a few pockets that are resisting, I want to live in those pockets.
But the good news about this is that if Joe Biden and his administration signs on to this quote unquote treaty, which I'm sure they will do, it's not an actual treaty that will be ratified by the Senate. And so DeSantis or Trump in 2024 can come in and just shred it and remove the U.S. I would go further. I would shred that treaty. Paris Climate Accord, leave that because Joe Biden re-entered us into it. Leave the WHO. I'd love to see us leave the UN.
That would be awesome.
I would love that. I would love to leave NATO. Like,
I was going to say, I don't know how that would go. That might be stickier.
That's an actual treaty, too.
Leaving NATO.
Yeah.
But if we did, I think our country would be much better off because we need to just focus on our own problems and stop involving ourselves everywhere globally.
Yeah. I mean, Europe has...
We need some consolidation here.
The European Union has something like 600 million people. And as a trading bloc, I think their economy is just as large, or if not larger, than the United States as an EU bloc. So there's absolutely no reason why they can't provide their own collective defense.
Well, they can. They just don't want to.
Right. It's like, why do we need to be a part of that?
Yeah. doesn't help us in any way, really.
I think we just need an anti-globalist backlash. We need to pull out of every global institution that we're a part of.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think we are actually seeing that on a more local level. I think a lot of just everyday Americans and their families are really starting to go back to basics, like of the golden years, so they're starting to want to bring back the nuclear family. They want to homeschool their children. You're starting to see this resurgence in Christianity and churchgoers.
Living off the land.
Living off the land. You're starting to see people give up their crappy jobs that they hate, even if they're making a lot of money. They go and they live somewhere very far away from people. They might have a job making less money, but they don't need much because they're more self-sufficient now. And you're seeing moms stay in the home more. Like, people in our generation who are on the right are really being drawn back to this lifestyle. People that are younger than me by a few years are foregoing college and they're doing trades, or they are just getting a job right out of high school where they are making a lot of money because they're intelligent. They just didn't get a degree.
Right.
And they are saving their money so they can actually buy homes, which a lot of millennials cannot do. And they are finding quality people of their age that they are choosing to commit to for life instead of being promiscuous and selfish. You're starting to see this resurgence of true American values within the average American. Of course, you do not see this looking at these major news organizations. You don't even really see that on the smaller ones like Tim Pool or Daily Wire or any of these smaller things. You don't really see that because it's so polarized no matter who you listen to. But if you are just interacting with the everyday American, they're like, man, I just want to get away from people. I don't want to live in a city. I want to have a family, and I want to do my own thing and not be bothered. The government has too much control. And I think all of the pandemic BS really brought this out in people. One, it's the realization that you're mortal and, you don't have much time. So why do anything that you're going to be miserable doing? But also, nothing is guaranteed because in an instant, something can be taken away from you. So you might as well just do what you can when you can. So I think as that movement kind of grows, there is going to be more support for withdrawing from these more global institutions.
Yeah.
As an entire nation. Yeah. We're going to be pressing for that to happen because we just want to go back to simpler, where we can focus on our own people and our own borders and fix that first.
Yeah. Once people are independent from the government in this nation, they're going to want our government to be independent from the other governments in the world.
Right.
I think you're right. And here's hoping that trend continues.
Yes.
All right. Hopefully. I think that's it for...
do we want to do the last?
Oh, this one? The damn mishes? Sure. Which one should I open up?
Well, the one's a video, so...
Which one?
I think the second one. Yeah.
So play this?
Yeah.
All right. So you want to give us set the stage here?
I just saw this. I thought it was funny. This is from Fox News. Horse-drawn Amish buggy crashes in police cruiser. We got a drunk Amish guy. And this is in Orwell, Ohio. And it's funny just because you don't expect an Amish person to be drinking and driving a buggy, but it is something that happens. I just thought it was a kind of a lighthearted news story to share.
All right, so let's take a look.
Yeah.
Hey! Wake up!
So he slapped on the buggy.
There's a Bud Light can sitting in there, and he passed clean out.
That's what he did to me.
He'll go home. The horse knows how to get home.
I don't even know if this is my call. I found him outside Philly.
418. He's eastbound on Bogue. B-O-G-U-E. We got a drunk Amish guy passed out in a buggy. Staley and Bogue Road. He just turned eastbound on Bogue. And I yelled at the guy when he rode by. There's a Bud Light can sitting in the buggy. And I hit the side of the buggy and hollered at the guy. He's passed clean out. He's slumped over.
The horse
The horse
No, I
won't
mean,
stop.
I'm yelling, whoa, 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 and no.
The horse is like, I'm not going down for this.
Yeah, he just
I'll
wants
see
to go
if
home.
I can get in front of him and slow down.
421.
Is that horse registered or the tag's expired?
421. You're getting check out?
So he's getting out of the cruiser now to go confront the horse. Oh, he parked in front of the buggy.
We might have it stopped. Nope.
And the buggy collided.
Disregard. He just rammed it into my car.
Hey, stop your horse. Stop your horse.
There's some other Amish people coming up from this side of the other
Stop
police
your
cruiser.
horse. Get your horse.
Look at this guy. He's so drunk.
Yeah, wow.
He's hanging on.
Yeah, he's like, he must have got jostled real hard when the buggy collided.
Well, also this thing in the front
Grab
of the
your
buggy is a
horse.
speaker.
Oh,
And I just want people to know that the Amish bump rap music.
really?
Yes.
Wow.
I live near some Amish. They ride by in their buggies, bumping Eminem. And you're going, what?
What was that song?
Okay, grab
Amish
the horse so it
Paradise? Like,
doesn't
it's
do any more
literally
damage,
The
please.
Weird Al Yankovic
Yeah.
song.
Just rammed it
They
into my
love the
car
rap
already.
music.
So the Amish people are coming up to wrangle the horse.
Yeah. They don't want the horse
Watch
taken off.
yourself. He's coming around to grab him. I don't want him backing up. And
Look at that. He ran right into the sheriff's car. Incredible.
So what do you have for text here?
So the text says an Amish man in Ohio was the subject of a low-speed police chase on May 14th when he was asleep while operating a horse and buggy, which, by the way, is illegal because
really?
it's drinking and driving.
Wow.
Even though the horse knows where to go. Ashtabula Sheriff's Deputy Mike Talbert attempted to stop the buggy at around 2:43 a.m. in Orwell, Ohio, but was unsuccessful and told other officers that the driver of the horse and buggy looked like he was asleep, according to Fox 8. Quote, there is a Bud Light can sitting in there and he's passed clean out, Talbert says. We got a drunk Amish guy passed out in a buggy.
Wow.
And I just thought it was funny because I've experienced this and I couldn't even believe it made it onto the news.
that is, yeah. I mean, it's like the first self-driving car.
Right.
It's like, yeah,
I think it's also just funny because people assume that the Amish are
nice and clean.
nice, clean, good Christians. They don't indulge. Oh, they're so bad.
Yeah.
Also, it's hilarious because he was like, oh, it's fine. He'll go home. The horse knows how to get home. They do, but he was... I didn't clip the part of the article, but they said that they received some calls because the buggy was all over the road. It's just funny. Every community's got their own problems.
Right. I wonder, they probably didn't even end up charging him, huh? Because it's like, but horse and buggy on a rural road.
I mean, it is drinking and driving,
Right.
so they could, and they could probably also cite him for public intoxication. Because it's not a
But why would they, though?
vehicle.
Because you're out there in the middle of nowhere at night when there's barely
They
anyone out.
probably gave him a fine.
I'm just wondering if they did anything. Would be interesting to find out.
I mean,
but-
those roads are pretty dangerous at night because they're so dark. And it didn't look like that buggy had any lights on it.
No, it did. Yeah,
Did
it had
it?
a flashing
Okay.
yellow light. Anyway, that's hilarious,
Anyway,
though.
it's just meant to be kind of lighthearted. No one got hurt. The Amish were having a good time, them young people.
Yep.
And it was just kind of funny. I mean, even the police officers were kind of laughing about it. I don't think they
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering if they did anything.
were too hard on him. They didn't say in the article, but
Cool. Well,
just
that's
something lighthearted to end on.
Yeah, that's a good one to end on. Cool. All right. Well, this has been Take Your Medicine. Once again, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And be sure to check out the links in the description to see us everywhere we are if you want to watch the episode more than once.
Don't drink and buggy.